As we prep the beds and yard and plan for this season's garden, consider where the water is and where it needs to go for successful growing. Great gardening is straight ahead.
We're like producing a serious amount of food.
We hope to be able to provide food for the community.
I love sharing the garden with others.
You can do a lot of fun things with broccoli.
All of our students here are involved in gardening.
It has a sign on the door that says my happy place, and it really is.
Hello and welcome to Great Gardening. I'm Pamela Fish and coming to you again this week from my home, but sharing this time with garden experts Bob Olin and Deb Burns Erickson, who are also following stay-at-home guidelines during the COVID-19 crisis. Welcome back, guys. Thanks for joining me. Just tell me a little bit about what you're seeing in your gardens and yards this week. Deb?
I've seen a lot of mold or vole damage and a lot of mouse damage, to some of the perennials, some of the shrubs. A lot more than I expected to see, but I think that could be a problem for a lot of people, possibly.
Yeah, right. How about you, Bob? Things popping up where you are?
They're starting. I would agree with what Deb had to say. We had that real heavy blanket of snow there very early, and there's going to be a considerable amount of vole damage. In particular, they scoot right along the turf layer there, and when they find particularly some young trees, they just gnaw into that bark. So once again, protection is the rule of thumb here, and sometimes we have to learn this the hard way. But there is going to be a fair amount of damage this year.
But we should be pulling off our tree guards and stuff now. Is that correct?
Well, at this point, if the snow is melted, now there's some areas where the snow isn't melted, but you can leave them on as long as there's a significant air gap between the actual plastic guard, assuming you're using a column of poly. It's just when that bark expands to the point where it comes in contact with the poly. You want to be conscious of that. And trees can grow very, very quickly, particularly with the types of moisture we've had. So be conscious of that. If there's any contact between the bark and the plastic, get those protective wraps off.
Okay, all right. Well, I want to remind folks that we don't have the phone lines to go to, but we are taking questions via email at ask@wdsc.org. And of course, Bob and Deb will be answering those questions coming up. But first, we want to talk about irrigation and water management. Here's a look at how one gardener keeps her many annuals and potted plants from drying out.
I have found that, my annuals do so much better when I run a drip line to them because you have really good intentions to keep them watered. There's a hose that runs to the middle there, and then it has a thicker tube. So there's a 1/2-inch tubing that runs all around the garden, and then I just tap into it with a 1/4-inch tube, which right here you can see it's this black tube. Attached to that is an emitter. I think this is probably a 1 gallon an hour emitter, and I run it for a half hour a day. So I'm supposed to get a 1/2 gallon. And it's on a timer. I'm like, I just buy all the pieces. And so I actually have 3 different sets. So I have one that actually starts behind the shed and does the hanging baskets, and it goes all the way around the woods and does the hanging baskets up there. And then I just tapped into that this year to do these 4 bubble gums. Yeah, it works pretty good. And it's like there's different emitters that you can put on them. Some are 1/2 gallon an hour or a gallon an hour. So if, things that I think need a little bit more. It's throughout the garden. Some people do it, to all their plants, but I feel like the perennials do okay without it. It's just the annuals really need it to dry out real quick. You do it once and they stay out all winter. They have an end cap, so I take that off and let the water drip out, and then I bring the timer inside and the faucet part.
And like under my pines is really nice because it's easy to forget that it didn't rain under there.
Well, that system seems to be working really well for Mary and Jeannie, and we thank them for sharing that with us. But I know there are lots of other ways that people put systems together or, have tips and tricks for watering.
Well, there certainly are. I think probably the most common, or what we call kind of, for the garden at least, what we call an ooze tube, where you've got a permeable tube that you just roll out and it oozes water onto the garden. Also, we've got these perforated hoses, kind of a flat hose that's perforated. And mistake that I see gardeners making is they've got the perforations so that the water's spraying up and getting the plants wet, just the opposite of what you want. So if you're going to use that kind of a system, make sure the perforations are down so that all that moisture is going into the soil and the plants stay dry. In this era, keeping plants dry with the humidity we're having and the disease pressure, it's very important, so you don't want to add additional water to it.
Right. We'll talk a little bit more about drainage and where we have too much water later on. And Deb, you have some examples too for us.
Right, I've got a couple. One is there's lots of self-watering containers available now. Like this is a weekender pot, and it has a gallon of water reservoir and a plug that you can pull to pull the water if it gets too wet. But it has a good amount of soil, and it has some wicking mechanisms. But these are Eklund weekender pots, so you can buy yourself a couple of free days from watering and actually take the weekend off from watering. Another kind of less expensive hack or tip is you can take an old bottle and like in a container, like especially in a tomato plant or a vegetable that you just can't get enough water on sometimes when they've got a lot of foliar weight and fruit weight, you can take a bottle like this or a soda bottle and put holes all over it and then sink it into the soil so that just the top is exposed, and then you can fill it with water. Just depending on how much water, what the rain has been like, or how much fruit you have set. And you can also then put in compost tea or some compost to it, or even some water-soluble fertilizer a little bit, and add the water to it just to get a little extra boost and easier control for watering and extra water in a container.
Excellent. Thanks, Deb, for that idea. We have some questions that have been coming in via email, and we thank folks for sharing those questions with us. So we know it's a little bit different than how we do it with our call-in show when we're all at the studio. But here's one from Brad in Iron River, who says, my garden's getting overwhelmed by horsetail, and I'm looking for advice. I think it was introduced when I added locally sourced sand to my heavy clay soil.
Deb, if you've got any ideas, I'm listening, because horsetail is one of the most difficult weeds to control. It's very, very primitive. It's a gymnosperm. It formed before we even had flowers. And it's resistant to most herbicides because it's got this real waxy silicon layer on the outside. Very resistant even to covering. I would say that it prefers very low fertility soils. Digging doesn't work, rototilling doesn't work, because it just thrives on these cuttings that you're making. I would probably be trying to increase the pH, get a little bit more alkalinity in the soil, and increase the nutrient levels so that your other plants can outcompete it. It competes extremely well in low nutrient areas. So it's kind of a long-term process to eliminate it, but there aren't any easy either herbicides or other control mechanisms.
Yeah, Deb, I don't know if you want to weigh in. I've had my share of troubles with horsetail.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough one to get rid of. But I do see it in some really problematic soil and not the best areas. And like Bob said, get other things to thrive and compete and get it out. That's a great idea.
Yeah, you might want to incorporate some organic material. It tends to grow in areas that are very sandy, and in those situations you don't have much nutrient available at all, so it competes very, very well. But again, cutting it, pulling it, it's got mechanisms that just make that extremely difficult to go. Covering, it's amazing. You can cover it for a year. This has been my experience. Pull the covers off after a year, hasn't been exposed to much sunlight, and it still repops and shoots out because those rhizomes can go on for 10 or 15 feet.
Okay, well, good luck with that. We also had that same question from Ellen and Steve in Nashwauk, but they have an additional question that they'd like answered. They have 6 apple trees planted in the last 2 years. protected them from the deer, but this year there were mice that ate the bark all the way around the trunks, partway up some of the branches on 4 of them. The other 2 have strips that were eaten, but not all the way around. Is there hope for these trees?
Well, in my opinion, if they're completely girdled, you're going to be surprised. You're going to pop the buds, but then the plant can't re-nourish itself because you destroyed all that vascular tissue that carries sugars and photosynthetates down to the roots. If that's completely circumscribed there, I would say I'd be planning on planting a few more trees, in all honesty.
Okay, Bob, there's another apple tree question here from Dave. I'm not sure where he was writing from, but he said after spring pruning of his trees, 2 trees produced several hundred apples each. But last year, one had 0 apples while the other had only 4 apples. So anyway, he's wondering, during a spring where an apple tree is covered with blooms, what percentage of apples should be pruned off before July?
Oh, it's a good question. What you got is the alternate bearing habit. You know, the flower buds set up in the fall. If there's a real heavy fruit crop one year, there isn't enough energy to set up the flower buds for the next year. So you get this on-off bearing habit. And he's right. The answer is I would let the fruit set so you're sure that before you start knocking blooms off. And then I'd be eliminating a lot of the real small fruit. I actually did a little work on that and found that one good size apple is supported by about 23 leaves. Now, you're obviously not going to count all the leaves on that tree, but if you do it once, you get a little idea, and you're going to be taking off quite a bit of fruit. That'll give you a crop this year, and there'll be enough energy in reserve so we can set flower buds for the following year, and then you kind of even your crop out. Commercially, they do that a number of different ways. That methods aren't really available to the homeowner, but definitely thinning down in heavy years is a good idea.
All right. Okay, I think we're going to move on at this point. We have more questions coming later, though. This week's tour shows us how gardens can serve as the focal point for at-home entertaining. Here's a look.
My name is Kara Siler. I live in Chester Park, and welcome to my garden. What I wanted to do here, I wanted to do a formal garden, and formal gardens really are about shape. And so everything, not too much blooms in here, it's just texture and shape mostly. And I have probably 50 boxwoods that I bought and try and keep trimmed. It used to be a basketball court. The big heart, it's for the engagement party for my son and daughter-in-law. So everything is hearts back here when the party happens. I do have the blue hydrangea around, but I just wanted something kind of plain. I like blue a lot. I have a lot of hydrangeas. That's probably my favorite flower. The Annabelles go sooner than the other ones. In the corner is all rhododendrons, and there's a big white apple tree, and then the pink azaleas are here. Now this is the end of the azaleas. I probably put those bulbs in a couple years ago. We have a lot of squirrels here that we feed and whatnot, so I kind of have to dig them down deep, and I think I planted 50 of them. There's probably 25 now. You know, they tend to dig them up, but yeah, they're still there, and the foxglove is relatively new. All the good smelling stuff is kind of up by where we sit. So the mock orange and the lilacs are up there. It's really nice. We love that. And it's like a little nest back there. We call it our cabin. When we added the addition, we realized we have a lake view going this way. We did 2 additions, but I did them knowing I wanted to do stuff underneath. It's too hot to sit back here facing south without that. We never were out here before. We have people over a lot, parties, whatnot. We have a coffee maker. We made a kitchen, everything out here. We sit out here, we have our coffee. Even when it's cold, like I told you before, we have heaters. That's a table heater. We have a heater over there, a fireplace, whatnot. So we can sit out here from April until October. It's more fun to, I think, entertain outside than inside. I wanted a pizza oven, and we started with that. We just have the herbs in there now. Just a little bit of fresh is really nice. Like I say, for the pizza oven, it's nice to have. So this garden's mostly just red and blue. And the woodgelia. I have the rhododendron. Over here is viburnum. And then petunias grow the best in the heat. The topiary, it's moss. If you keep it wet, they're green. I love moss stuff, but it's so hot and right there, so they kind of turn brown, but I like the natural look of it. And then, you know, the big, huge planters are heavy to move. Unfortunately, my mother died, and that was her favorite thing, was ferns, so I took some out of her yard, which came from Wisconsin, and they spread everywhere. They really, and yeah, they're the really giant ones. They get much bigger during the year. We have so many hostas around here, I just dig them up and put them here, and these ferns are actually from out of the garden. Just take what I have and put it in here, because, you know, I wanted the height. Ferns do the best, really. I love moss things. I have a lot of moss. And of course the candles for the party I've got. And it's on a stake in there, so it stays there. And it being wet, you don't have to worry about it yellowing. It's like I have every color phlox. There's probably 7 clumps of them, and they go from the dark red to the purple to the pink. There's roses in the front, and then climbing roses go up the trellis. I have the waterfall in the front, and then I just love that sound. The waterfalls by our bedroom. Yeah, it takes care of itself. It just recirculates. It's really nice. And the birds and all that, they just love that. My husband and I used to always drive to Inger Tower. You know, they're beautiful gardens. You know, I got a lot of ideas from there. When I look back, I think, you know, it did really do well.
Well, obviously, that looks like the place to party in the summer. We want to thank Kara for that tour. That was really a lot of fun. We're going to get to some more questions now. And one of them is from somebody who lives, Mark, who lives on a shady lot on a hillside in Duluth with hostas that were attacked by slugs. And that's something that Kara dealt with. She said that she used a lot of Sluggo on her hostas, and they did look great. But anyway, he's used beer in cups, eggshells, tinfoil on the ground, around the bases of the plants to no avail. What do you suggest to control the slugs?
Well, obviously, part of it is the fact that there's so much moisture there. Slugs really are terrestrial snails, so there has to be plenty of moisture. Anything you do to change the environment is going to be helpful, including raising your beds. But if you've got ornamentals, you can certainly use a product. I believe she mentioned one there. There are 2 active ingredients that are labeled just for use in ornamentals. So mesrol metaldehyde, whatever the trade name is, you have to be very careful with these products and keep them out of the vegetable garden. There are a couple products that are labeled as organic that can be used in the vegetable garden, but you want to read the labels very carefully. The other thing, again, is raising beds, trying to get rid of some of the moisture, opening areas up, put a perimeter around your garden of open soil rather than grass so they can't sneak in from this environment. At night, typically, they move in.
Yeah, Mark was saying that they got so bad last year that they went from the hostas to the hydrangeas. Have you seen that happen?
Yeah, they can be absolutely vicious. They can strip a lot of different crops. And again, a good perimeter is not a bad idea. You can use diatomaceous earth if you had a perimeter around your entire garden, maybe an 18-inch or 2-foot wide path there. And if you layered that with diatomaceous earth, they don't like to crawl across that. That's a filtering compound that can be purchased locally. That might be another alternative. Raising the beds, perimeter on the vegetable garden, then being extremely careful about the kind of products that you're using.
Okay. Well, Carolyn from Renshaw sent in this picture, was wondering what you guys think it is. It's a plant that came up in one of the other plants by itself. Take a look and let me know what you think, Deb.
Looks like ground cherry to me, which is a great fruit. I love ground cherry. So I'd thin it out of there and I'd get it in its own little pot and get it going. Or get it in the ground. So you get some nice ground cherries.
All right. Great. Hopefully Carolyn can make use of that.
No longer a weed. It's no longer a weed. It's an actual crop.
Yeah, right. Okay, here's one from Barbie. Is goose poop good to mix in with vegetable garden soil?
Oh boy. I'm not a huge advocate of mixing things directly. I think if she wanted to compost some of that and get a good active compost pile where we start breaking down some of these things, any fecal material from animals, particularly cats, I would definitely stay away from. And if you have it and it's available, get it composted good for a year in a hot pile and you should be okay.
Thanks. How large and deep should a raised bed be to accommodate rhubarb? And that's from Wanda.
You know, anytime we put them in raised beds, the problem we have is we have cold penetration from the outside. Now, fortunately, rhubarb is extremely cold tolerant. I would say she wants to plant it down the middle and give yourself another foot around the perimeters so that it's well insulated. You might also take that raised bed and drop a piece of poly foam right down along the outside perimeter of the bed so we get some insulation, and any snow you could put on there for protection would be valuable as well.
Photos of blooms coming up from spring through late summer. That's in this week's Grow and Show. Mark and Dawn Olson grew lovely bearded iris in their garden in Tower. There were peonies in bright shades of pink and red poppies too. White roses on a shrub, and a nearly perfect white dahlia flower. Here's great niece Allie preparing for fun in the gardens. Mark and Dawn say this stargazer lily always blooms near their anniversary date in early August. And the fall season brings some apples for the harvest. Carol Moyer is looking forward to spring blooms with this look back at containers of begonias, red angel wing on the deck, and a hanging basket pretty in pink and yellow. Nearby, a stunning orange-colored iris. And Colleen Crow had a delightful crowd of morning glories grow up to greet her at the mailbox. If you have garden delights to share, send them our way to greatgardening@wdsc.org so we can show what you grow. Okay, there were some begonias in that Grow and Show, and I always get the dragon wing begonias mixed up from the angel wing begonias. But anyway, Deb, we have a question from Julie who says she brought a large pot of angel wing begonias in all winter. They did well. She cut it back twice. Does she need to do anything, Esther, before bringing those back outside when it's warm enough?
Oh, right. So she can just start to, get them out little by little. Just watch the how much sun they're getting and how much direct sun, because they can get some burning if you just take them right out and into the sun. I mean, they're a begonia, and so they can tolerate a little bit more. But acclimating them to the conditions, and sometimes not just putting them in a protected area when you bring them outside, because of the wind desiccation you can get, because they're nice sized leaves, they're very ornamental, and so you just don't want them to get wind whipped at all or any desiccation. So just well watered when you put them out. But if she's done well so far, so she'll probably do just fine getting it out.
Okay, great. And we talked earlier about irrigation, but finding the right watering system is just one key chore for gardeners. What about when you have too much water or too much in the wrong place? Bob, you had some ideas for drainage and how people need to be concerned about that.
I think so. We are definitely seeing a change in our weather patterns, and we're seeing these rainfall events where we get very intense amounts of rain. Last summer, as an example, we did have a brief dry period, but most of the season was almost too much rain in most locations. So I think people want to be very conscious as they're building their garden beds. Raised beds are a good idea, but you don't necessarily need to have a structure on the outside. Just get some soil raised up and then increase the porosity, the drainage capacity of the soil by adding, I love organic material. You can add that. I would stay away from sands. A lot of people like to add sand, but then we can get kind of a hard pan. So stay with organic materials, raise the beds, and be very conscious. Don't overwater, because the pattern seems to be rainfall events and more moisture actually than we can accommodate.
Right. Yeah, it is changing out there a bit, and we know you're keeping a close eye on it. Thanks for that. Let's see, a question with a picture now. This came from Jeff in Duluth Lakewood Township. He says, what is doing this to my septic mound? It was there when the snow melted, and you can see those big heaps of dirt there. Deb, what do you think that is?
Yeah, vole damage. I'm pretty sure it's vole damage. We get it on our septic tank too. It's nice and warm near the septic tank and where the drain lines go out, and so they'll really enjoy that, especially with the amount of snow cover that we had this winter too. I'm sure they had a great time.
All right. Okay, we're out of time for questions, but I want to remind people, don't forget to watch our website for all the latest from Great Gardening, and also follow our Instagram page. And then please continue to send your questions via email to ask@wdse.org. Bob, Deb, thanks again for all the great information and for encouraging folks to bring beauty and good health to their lives by growing flowers and nurturing fruits and vegetables. It's really the time for that, right?
Oh, it really is. We got a big gardening season ahead, and people are going to appreciate it, I think, more than ever this year.
Indeed. Indeed. All right. Well, thanks, you guys. And thanks to everyone else who sent in questions, who continues to follow us and watch us. From all of us here at Great Gardening, enjoy the garden.
Funding for Great Gardening is brought to you by the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.